This podcast was produced from a webinar. For a more interactive experience with visuals, visit advancedmanufacturing.org/webinars. Today we'll be exploring the topic From Tribal Knowledge to AI Advantage, Unlocking the Hidden Power of Your Manufacturing Data. This presentation is sponsored by CADDi, and we're joined by Aaron Lober, VP of Marketing, Chris Cope, VP of Engineering, and Patrick Harrigan, VP of Partnerships at CADDi. Now it's my pleasure to turn things over to Aaron and the CADDi team. Welcome. We're happy to have you join us today.
Thank you, Carrie. I really appreciate you having us. And we're very excited to be having this conversation with everybody. I appreciate the SME team teeing us up. What we're going to try to do today is spend our time talking about how manufacturers should be thinking about their operations, specifically how they should be thinking about harnessing all of the institutional or tribal or tacit knowledge that their organization's been able to generate over the last several decades to create an advantage in the age of AI. I know it was just said, but it's worth repeating. My name's Aaron Lober. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at CADDi. I'm going to be the moderator and sort of our lead storyteller for the presentation, but of course, I brought the real experts with me, Chris and Patrick. So I think, guys, I just want to take a second and help everybody get a sense of your bona fides. And I'd love, Patrick, to come to you first. You have a really interesting background and exposure in manufacturing. I'm wondering if you can share that with folks.
Interesting background, sure. I don't know about an expert on anything, but happy to. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Patrick Harrigan. I have been with CADDi for a little bit over a year. I lead our global partnership strategy, and that includes everything from folks who help us resell in the market and certainly folks who help us implement and extend and augment our solution offerings with a broader technology partner ecosystem. I was fortunate enough to stumble into manufacturing right out of college about 15 years ago. Didn't know this was going to be my path, but here we are 15 years later, and it's all I've ever done. So heavily invested in the future of manufacturing in particular here in the U.S. So excited to share some insights and learn from you all today as well.
I appreciate that. And Chris, as I turn it over to you, and I'm really interested in the same question, it's worth me saying first, you are our call it AI and systems architecture guru here in the U.S. business for CADDi. So, in addition to your deep manufacturing background, you've also furnished us with some of my favorite AI-generated photos of our mascot, Gory Coon, which hopefully folks found on LinkedIn, either my post or Chris's. But I'd love to get a sense, Chris, if you can share with folks, what you bring to the table here.
Yeah, no, Gory Coon's fun. So for people who probably don't know, there was this Nano Banana video editing model that came out that was really good a month ago, I think. And I started just for fun generating kind of like a CADDi mascot and then sticking him in photos of us at trade shows and everything. And we were at FabTech 2 weeks ago, and people would come up to the booth looking for, I post on LinkedIn picture of our booth with us in it, and then here's this like mascot, and people would come up to the booth wanting to know where the mascot was. That wasn't my intention to be deceptive, but it was fun. So I got involved in AI back in undergraduate. AI was very cool and exciting to me. It wasn't that useful. The neural networks I started to use around when I was in graduate school maybe had 1,000 parameters in them. So today's have hundreds of billions. So it wasn't that useful, but it was very exciting. And then I've done a lot of like large scale computing projects for both government and startups. And then I was at a company called Xometry, which is like another manufacturing AI company, but one that manufactures parts or sort of the middleman for part manufacturing. And I was there for a long time, so very early when the company started. So I've been involved in manufacturing and AI and a lot of the security related to manufacturing data in for really a while, I think.
Well, I'm really looking forward to drawing some of that out. I know part of our discussion is going to probably touch the idea of manufacturing sort of starting to bridge the gap between the digital and the physical, because that's I think people's long-term hope for AI and robotics. And I think about the Gory Coon example as being an early indicator of that, because the digitally created mascot is now going to force me to go out and buy a mascot outfit, thus making it physical and real. But jokes aside, before we really get into it, just one piece of very quick housekeeping. We're obviously recording the session today, and we'll be sharing the slides at the in follow-up. We're also going to be discussing very briefly a 90-day plan for starting to go through sort of an AI implementation. We have a one-pager for that we're going to be sharing with registrants as well. So the final thing to say is we'll save about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions as we go, please drop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to address all of them. A speed run of the agenda, if you will. Our goal today is to really have a conversation that's very pragmatic. We're going to be exploring what leaders are doing differently with enterprise data, how AI can help tame some of their cost volatility, and how high mix, low volume teams are actually using data and AI today to avoid things like reinventing the wheel and creating some efficiencies in the process. So we'll close, as I said, with a little bit of a discussion of that 90-day plan. But what you're really going to be walking away with from this conversation is essentially three things. A mental model for the concept of digital thread as a business system, some steps in a playbook for price sensing or should cost analysis to try to tame price volatility, and then a fairly simple pathway for reuse of design. So I hope that all of these are very valuable for folks. Before we then dive in, I do want to stop and just take a quick poll. Oh, it looks like we don't have our poll questions up in here. So as I pop to the next one, we might have to skip this. Sorry, SME guys. It looks like we didn't get our poll questions actually structured. So c'est la vie. Okay. Well, stepping past then is totally fine. I think we can dive straight in. And the first thing that I want to acknowledge, because I think it's really important context for the rest of the discussion, is that two realities are heavily felt by manufacturers today, especially in the US, and they kind of shape this talk. The first one is volatility is absolutely back. It's a signal, not just a shock. And the winners in American manufacturing today are going to sense it early, and they're reacting to it with playbooks, not simply a gut feel. Right? This is coming through tariffs that are impacting supply chains, which, by the way, today remain uneven, have never truly recovered all the way from our experience with COVID. So there's a lot out there that people need to be very reactive to. The second reality that I think we all need to face is there is a massive deluge of data that has been generated over the last several decades of digitization and digitalization. This deluge is real, but the real value of all of that data is remaining tucked away, or it's remaining dependent on better structuring. So leaders here, folks who are going to get sort of first mover advantage, they are going to take the time to wire a digital thread across their drawings, purchase orders, quality, and supplier context. And that's what's going to ultimately unlock AI in practice. Now, this is already starting to happen. So I believe it was NAM and their Manufacturing Leadership Council who said, today, most manufacturers are still 70% are relying on some level of manual input, not very scalable given the volume of data we have here. And the vast majority are still struggling to access all of the internal data that they need to actually drive successful AI adoption. So this is sort of the bedrock of the discussion, if you will. If that doesn't feel intuitively true, by the way, I'll invite you to envision just the opposite for a second. Most teams are sort of quietly paying this tribal knowledge tax. Engineers are spending more time than they need to, searching for things, renaming products, recreating the wheel consistently. And every duplicate part is quietly adding to inventory or to QA noise or to supplier overhead. And even a tiny little lift in reuse can be a seven-figure lever. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit later about how leaders avoid that tax. So I'm going to try to unpack that for folks. But I think the first thing to say is this reality of the tribal knowledge tax is felt doubly so by folks who do high mix, low volume work. Because ultimately, the variety of high mix, low volume amplifies both the pain and the payoff. Right. So the more changeovers that you're going through in your manufacturing process, the more benefit you're going to net from clean, connected context that leads to faster quotation, fewer duplicates created, or better traceability. It's not only folks who are doing high mix, low volume work who stand to benefit from a better data paradigm that helps them adjust to the fluctuating reality we're operating in, but they probably feel it in the most acute way. So if you're one of those, this session is really, really designed for you. Okay, it's worth acknowledging, right? It's a little scary out there. The folks doing more complex work probably feel the most pain, but they also, as I said, have the largest opportunity. Beyond that, I think we want to talk a little bit about what types of patterns we're seeing among CADDi customers, or at least coming from those who seem to be really winning in their spaces. So here, there are at least three that we've structured much of this session around. First, they treat digital thread like a business system. Second, they work hard to close the loop between design and sourcing. And third, they make reuse of design the default. So digital thread, it may sound science fiction for folks, may sound a little complicated. I'm going to turn to Chris to help unpack that in a moment. But first, I just want to set a clear context. When I say something like treat digital thread like a business system, what I really mean is put governance before applications themselves. So establish things like standard names, part families, and metadata that travels with the products you create. Some people are already bought into this conceptually. If you're invested in a PLM, PDM solution, you probably believe in this paradigm. You may just, in fact, be a little limited. It's worth pointing out there's actually proof points worth discussing, right? Investments in digital thread and digital twin are actually skyrocketing today. I think it's McKinsey who has these two solutions at a 20% CAGR in terms of their adoption over the last several years. Doing this well, this is really critical for large companies with long operational histories. And also, I guess, really worth saying, operations that are dispersed across the globe, right? Again, the more data you create and the more dispersed your operations, the more likely you are to have this pain related to your data being siloed or scattered around and unusable. Going through a change management process like this, application first, is just a total recipe for disaster. But I think a lot of leaders inherently kind of understand this point. AI adoption has taken big leaps forward. I know I just mentioned McKinsey. I believe they also released a report for this year saying AI adoption across manufacturing had actually reached its peak so far at 72% across the industry, which is a large leap. We surveyed last year the SME user base, and I think we got a number, self-reported albeit, from folks of closer to 25% adoption. So obviously people recognize this as a really important area for them to place their dollars. These solutions, by the way, I mean, if we're turning to digital thread and digital twin specifically, they're really helping folks finally start to jumpstart some of the flagging labor productivity that's been plaguing manufacturing in the US for over a decade. So it's pretty clear people get the value. But hopefully they also understand, or at least are beginning to, that it's important to create a data environment that actually mirrors the actual world reality if they want to be successful with AI adoption. So this is a great transition point, Chris, for me to turn to you. Obviously, the foundation matters. The foundation for your data environment matters probably more than a singular tool. How would you advise people go about setting up this data foundation without, boiling the ocean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say earlier you said you have a 90-day roadmap, right? So I think that you absolutely should be setting yourself up to see big gains, return on investment within 90 days. And initially, you do want to set up some kind of data foundation. You do want to make sure that there is every one thing I've learned at this job is like every company is completely different. I don't think any of our customers have one ERP. They all have like a dozen ERPs. So I think it's good to have some kind of universal identifier, some consistency around part IDs, and make sure that you're setting that up if you don't have that already. But then you really want to start delivering on value, delivering transformation. So I'll talk about a couple like little quick examples. So one thing is when you want to build, first off, you want to pick. You don't want to try to come up with like a 5-year AI roadmap. That's something that I think in enterprise IT that has been a common thing of, we're going to have a 5-year digital transformation roadmap or 5-year cloud adoption roadmap. And I think with AI, things are moving too quickly. Any time you spend building that roadmap is going to be wasted, and then things are going to change, and you're going to learn a lot over the next few months that you couldn't possibly know until you actually jumped in. So start with some kind of foundation around data organization, but don't try to organize all your data at once. Pick a couple problems that you can jump into right away. So we do this all the time. You ask either like a factory lead or an IT director, what are some 2-3 or procurement director, what are 2-3 problems that are important to your business that you think you're not doing right. Like reuse part reuse is a really good one. And then just start diving into that with some platform like CADDi. So talk about reuse, for example. It's very easy for a designer. You can build a system that where you're able to make it easier to search for parts that you can reuse, but you need to stick that in front of the actual designers. It can't be like off the, in a different department or something, or managed centrally. It needs to be something that a designer can quickly engage in, and then say, okay, great, I don't have to spend 8 hours searching for designs or 8 hours designing a new part. I can quickly reuse something and move on to the next problem. I don't have to build a new supply chain. We don't have to worry about quality issues down the field because we already have all that data. So it's like just pick something now, start working on that. Don't get, even though AI is the tool, don't get fixated on AI transformation in general. Focus on a couple problems and then just start solving them. Back to reuse, like a good solution is, okay, we made it really easy for someone to quickly say, oh, look, I already have a part that does what I need to do, and I can use that right now. The better solution in the future would be to have an agent actually at the point of when someone is designing something and say, hey, I see you're designing something. RFQ or something, do you know that you already have a part just that already satisfies that problem? Why are you designing a new thing? That would be like a V2, but just start with V1.
Yeah, I think that's a really that's a point well taken. We've talked a little bit about the idea of minimum viable, right? And so if you try to go too big too fast, your change management effort's likely to be a little challenged. So it's important to find sort of like the minimum viable execution of digital thread that's going to be helpful for you. For us, our hypothesis for a long time has been that lives in your design and procurement data, or tying design to cost in that way. That's sort of the bedrock of what CADDi does. I'm curious, if I pressed you, let's say the reality of someone's business today is that their data environment is incredibly messy, and they've got to do something about that if they want to make some headway. Where can they start? Say, today's Wednesday, Thursday morning. What's a step one for people to tackle?
So I have seen at other companies, these like enterprise SaaS consultants that have been around for a decade. They have spent these poor guys have spent countless months and years of their lives working on some kind of huge transformation preparation project for a company to adopt some SaaS, and cleaning up all their data, and then all of a sudden, and then after 6 or 12 months of prep work, there is no adoption. So there's always the data. You need to clean up the data, but you can't wait until all the data is perfect, or you will never start. So back to my point of pick a problem. Let's say it's responding to RFQs, right? So pick a problem, then look at what's the data around that problem, and then focus on that, clean that up, build the solution, deliver something. Don't try to make sure that all of the data in the company is well structured and organized, and even if you did that effort, you're wasting time, and then something else is going to come around, and you're going to realize you got to change the structure, or there's going to be less of your data, or this happens to all our customers a lot. There's a merger acquisition, right? That's why you ended up with 12 ERPs with different organizational systems. So don't try to wait until things are perfect before starting. In the news, there's a bunch of companies that are, I keep seeing a lot of posts about their AI adoption being really successful. Walmart and Citigroup, they've been in the news the last 2 weeks about giving AI agents to all of their office workers. And I know their data is not clean. I know that they have probably spent countless amounts of money and effort cleaning up their data over the last 10 years, but they're still having issues. But they're able to, these large companies are able to sort of say, we're going to do this quick pilot, deploy agents, see what happens, move the needle, and then come back and figure out, well, what, maybe we'll invest in transforming this other part of the business with AI, or this other part of the business. So I really think it's about doing some. If you did something today as a company, you would be smarter in 3 months about what works and what doesn't than you would if you spent the next 3 months trying to clean up all your data before starting.
Yeah, it's a point really well taken. There is something in that example of Citigroup and Walmart, though, that I think is worth hammering. As you said it, right? I'm sure they have some governance in place. They're keeping the scope relatively small, but when they roll out, they're looking to move the needle, as you said, right? So I think that's another really important point for us to make. Have very clear, measurable KPIs, right? So you've talked about already reuse or speeding up the RFQ process. These are contained work streams, it's really important to understand if you're going to take a small bite, what does success look like? So establishing clear, measurable KPIs. And you participate actually in this conversation with CADDi customers a lot as they get going. I'm wondering if you can expand that thought at all.
Yeah. So I would say I can think of two customers that are interesting to talk about. One, so imagine if you could in 90 days respond to RFQs twice as fast as you do today, right? That would be a big deal. We have a customer, multi-billion-dollar manufacturer of heavy industry equipment, and they did that with after using CADDi for a few months, and it wasn't like they didn't try to apply AI to the entire business. It was just I want my procurement team to, when we're responding to RFQs, I want them to have all the data in front of them to be able to price that and procure and submit that response based upon past data, performance data of our own supply chain. That was all they focused on initially, and that worked really, really well. The other example, this is off the cuff. I was at a customer on Monday who's in Detroit, and just like 2 days ago, I was in Detroit at a customer, and they are taking the digital twin. I love what they're doing. They're taking the digital twin concept, like literally, where they're like, we want to actually simulate. We want to actually have some of these like huge experts in our company, like individuals. I don't say the names. So I'll just say Bob, and we want to make AI Bob. Like this is what they're trying to do. They're like, we're using CADDi to make AI Bob.
That's
so
right.
that when someone has a question for Bob, they can just ask AI Bob. That frees up Bob's time. It centralizes the knowledge, and then it also lets them make decisions so much faster as an organization than they used to. Because if you think about, Bob's the expert, and if they're watching this, they know exactly who we're talking about. And if Bob's the expert, and everyone's like, oh, I have a question for Bob, and I need to get his input, and then I can use that expertise and make a decision. There's this, I'll set up a meeting with him. It'll take a day or two. I have to wait a day or two, and just by being able to get like instant feedback and get the information you need to start making decisions, as a company, they can just move tremendously faster and make sort of like from the bottom up, make decisions much faster as a team. And
sorry to interrupt. The thing I wanted to say there is part of what I love so much about that, right, is there's already an entrenched business process, obviously, there of folks coming to Bob, right, and we can point to for that company how inefficient the process may be, right, because Bob is obviously a bottleneck. But there's already built-in baked human behavior. So from a change management perspective, being able to replicate Bob infinitely is so much easier for a company than getting 1,000 different people to change the behavior of going to a trusted source. So I find that example hilarious.
We had a good meeting on Monday, and the way that they're kind of taking, like, embracing that. It's good for Bob because Bob isn't tied up all day in having just a bunch of meetings where everyone's picking his brain, but also it's good for everyone else because they can move faster, and Bob can do the things that Bob wants to do and build the company and everything, as opposed to just being the have to spend his time answering questions.
Well, it's actually not a terrible segue, given we're already talking about folks working together. But I want to move us to the next sort of pattern that we see amidst our customers. And that's the most successful folks that we speak with are closing the loop between design and sourcing, or engineering in their supply chain. And there are many different modes of doing this, by the way. Some folks are doing this by tying geometry or material to cost drivers. That's a data initiative. Or feeding price signals and tariff exposure back to their procurement and engineers before the RFQ process. Right. Again, this is about getting people in a shared sandbox. I think, though, as I was preparing this, Chris, I think I want to stay with you. I was thinking about how probably everyone on the call today should be familiar with this concept of VAVE. And it's one of the early use cases that we were talking about for folks in the US. And I'm hoping I can maybe get you to vamp a little bit on how this idea of like the shared data environment, the shared sandbox, helps a team, like a diverse team who's going through VAVE as an exercise.
Yeah. Yeah, let me think for 1 second. So I think one thing when you're doing VAVE, not like no. Usually the company, the designs and the data are so diverse and so big that no one actually understands it all in their head. And so I think having actually having a tool like CADDi where you're actually able to understand like what are our parts that are, you know, our biggest like profit drivers or value drivers, and responding to RFQs is like really helps you really helps them understand like how can we be faster and more profitable for, say, responding to RFQ. Do we know that these things are like, there are experts in the company like the Bobs of manufacturers who know that, oh, well, we know that every time we use this design, we have quality issues we have to worry about. We have supply chain hiccups that cut into our margins. But having all this data, on a platform like CADDi, where it's all in front of you and it's all linked, and it's all like, the similarity is all measurable and in front of you. I think that really helps everybody's, like, everyone's eyeballs look at the same thing, and be able to build solutions much faster.
When I pose that question, by the way, Chris, what the story that it always comes to mind for me, this is true for a few of our biggest customers in the automotive vertical, right? Where the OEM tier one supplier relationship is sort of dominated by this requirement for most suppliers to find some, about like 3% annual cost savings or cost down opportunities if they want to keep the OEM business. And that's been like a mainstay of automotive for a long time. And so I always think about how, for folks who are having this experience, like, one of the best ways to find cost down opportunities is to pull in, or for engineering to pull in their supply chain stakeholders as early as possible, right? So it's the procurement folks who, by virtue of playing in the same sandbox as their engineering counterparts, can say, hey, this design choice, I can support it with an existing supplier within our network, and we can get this turned around fast and at cost. Or this is going to create some real challenges for us. Maybe you want to rethink it. Patrick, I'd love to throw it to you here too, because you had the benefit of getting tipped off to this reality at the same time I did by Philip Carpenito, the former chief procurement officer of L3Harris, who was making this point that winning organizations find a way to put design and procurement on the same page. But I'm wondering if there are any other quick stories you can share where you've seen design and sourcing alignment pay off.
Yeah, happy to. I think, I might take a different approach. Maybe I'll share a story of where it's worked well, and then a story of maybe a horror story area of opportunity for a current project we're working now. I think the key takeaway, to harp on what you just alluded to, is seamless collaboration between design and procurement and sourcing teams ultimately is critical to becoming a world-class manufacturer. I wish I could claim that myself, but as you alluded to, that's a quote from Philip. And that really had opened my eyes about a year ago to the opportunity that sits in front of us. Coming from a manufacturing consulting background, where my whole life was eliminating waste on the production and operation side of the business, when you switch gears to engineering, design, procurement, more of the quote unquote back office functions, and you see the area of opportunity to eliminate waste in some of these processes. This one in particular is very low hanging fruit for most organizations. Let me drill into that a little bit more. So the idea being, if you look at a standard engineering design process, we're bringing a new product to market. Anywhere between 10 to 20% of that time is quite often spent on redoing or reiterating on designs based on feedback coming from procurement and sourcing teams. So that feedback can be in the sense of, hey, we're having issues sourcing this type of material, or the costs associated in this material at this given time isn't viable for us to actually bring this product to market right now, or the procurement constraints on lead times and deliveries and things of that nature. Most of the time in that engineering design process, those discussions aren't had almost until the end. So we spend months and months and months designing. We finally send it over to procurement or sourcing. We then get feedback and have to redo a lot of these designs. So there's really a couple options we have. We can either pull forward those conversations earlier in the design process, or if you want to sort of keep the separation and the lack of collaboration, you certainly need to empower your sourcing team with all the information they need to make better, smarter, faster decisions so that they can turn around these approvals much faster. So it's that lack of collaboration we see as a massive opportunity within almost all of our customers. Back to your original question, who does this well? I think if you look on our website, we have a dozen examples of case studies, but one that sticks out in particular, very large companies, as you can imagine, have massive issues with collaboration, cross-functional collaboration between departments. Someone like a Subaru was going through this exact scenario a couple years ago before adopting CADDi. And as you see it well documented on the site, you're talking of hundreds of hours saved with increased collaboration and better search capabilities per month, which is huge seven-figure returns for these folks. If I could add just one last comment, I know this is a little long-winded, but I mentioned someone who's not doing it correctly. I was on site last week with a power generation company here in Georgia, where I'm based, and they have a central product that is their moneymaker. They make all their money off of this project, all their margin off of this product. It's a highly customized product that they can charge a premium for. And over time, just as long as that product was out the door on time and delivered on time, no one really dug into how the actual purchasing and procurement elements or costs associated with this given product have skyrocketed. And within a couple hours of sort of massaging some of their data, we found out that purchasing over time has just gone to a single supplier model because they know they can deliver on time, but that supplier has also skyrocketed their costs or their price to this customer. And so it presents a massive seven-figure area of opportunity that went completely unnoticed throughout their sourcing operations because of the lack of collaboration between engineering and procurement. Everyone was technically doing their job right and correct, but they weren't doing it most efficiently with all the information that was available to them to ultimately drive down additional costs for the company.
That's an excellent point. And actually, we're going to talk just a little bit later about getting out of the fixed supplier system and adopting a more dynamic supplier model. So that's a point really well taken. But I think I want to stay for a second with the Subaru example, because the very next pattern we're going to move into to talk about, which Chris already alluded to early, is this putting an end to reinventing the wheel, or put another way, making reuse of design the default for your team. Subaru is a great example of that, by the way. I mean, what they've been able to do, consolidating designs just for a singular component piece like fasteners has been really, really effective for their group. And actually, you see that as a through line through a lot of the automotive manufacturers. I know maybe I shouldn't name the others that we're currently talking to right now, but to take my word for it, it's a through line. Of course, that gets much harder, right? It's you're much more likely to reinvent the wheel if it's hard for your team to find reference parts to reuse, right? Engineers in that scenario, by the way, if search times are long, engineers are going to do precisely what they do best. They're going to start designing. Because that's where they individually capture an efficiency. It's more efficient for them to do that. But overall, for the business, the moment an engineer starts to design a new part, prior art and alternatives, they need to be one click away, or you're assuming probably a more significant economic cost than many realize. I know we're running a little slow, but I want to take a second and sort of articulate this point because I think it's really important and subtle for folks. And this is, of course, we're drawing some information from our customers here. So I'm going to use some customer data to illustrate the value of reuse economics. So if you're in a business, again, we talked about high mix, low volume manufacturers, and you're introducing, say, 10,000 parts a year. Which is not crazy for somebody in that scenario. And each new part costs roughly about $5,000 across its life cycle. Then a 2% reuse uplift avoids the creation of about 200 parts and about $1 million avoided right there. So you can add another, $4,500 to $7,500 a year in carrying cost for each of those redundant parts, and you've got another basically $1 million to $1.5 million. So we're talking about $2 to $2.5 million saved a year without that. And by the way, this is just reuse. This is before we get into impact on quality or supplier complexity. So the simple directive anyway here, the very simple directive is start reusing old designs. Do it as quickly as possible. Do it everywhere possible. Now, because we are a little behind the curve where I want to be, I want to shift and I want to talk about how to navigate tariffs and how to navigate pricing fluctuations with the help of data and AI. So it's worth saying again, right? The leaders in manufacturing are observing those three patterns that we just talked about. That's what they're already doing to differentiate themselves. What we're going to cover now is really what everyone needs to start thinking much more seriously about, given the current geopolitical climate, how we may see, again, cost fluctuation shifting with basically every new quarter. By the way, before we get into that, I don't want to understate how much pain is actually being felt by major manufacturers right now with respect to this. Folks are working on sort of rewiring their supply chains, and it's a big lift. Most companies have worked decades to construct the supply chain that they have, so that's why this gets its own section. Ideally, this is something where companies might have had years of notice to implement changes, but that's not really the reality that we live in. So here we are. Now, I think there's a risk, by the way, because we're introducing this idea of fluctuating cost. There's a risk of only thinking about tariffs in relation to their impact on landed cost, and that's obviously real. But it really, if that's the totality of your understanding, it kind of understates the added difficulty felt by manufacturers in getting their parts across the border. There is a significant additional burden that's placed on manufacturers to just demonstrate compliance. We see that with our customers. That's putting some pressure on folks to really anticipate both cost fluctuation and how to do compliance in a new way with some shifting guidelines.
Hey, Aaron, can I interrupt real quick?
Sure.
I think this is conceptually very accurate. Is there a specific example you might be able to sort of drive this home with?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I don't know that I can share the name of the manufacturer in question yet, but we'll say they're a very well-known tooling company. You may, in fact, have some of their products in your own house. Right now, they've come to CADDi primarily for us to do two things for them. One, create, or sort of help with a data harmonization exercise, create the type of structured data model they want to use to operate their business moving forward, certainly to drive AI initiatives. But the very first one, like in the spirit of what Chris said, have a small scope. The very first initiative is basically using CADDi to identify every one of their product lines that has an exposure to aluminum from Vietnam and Thailand. Specifically, those two, aluminum right now is feeling specifically some elevated tariff pressure, and they need to both identify which product lines feature aluminum so they can reconsider where they source from, but also importantly, so when their team shows up at the port to collect component parts or finished products, they can actually hand over reports to the powers that be that say this is what we in fact owe you for the import tariff. And it's that ability to say firmly, here's what we actually owe you proactively, that they were previously really challenged with. And it was leading to their products getting stuck, sitting at a port of entry for weeks, which obviously for a company of that size is totally untenable. It has a massive impact on revenue. So that's where we've started, basically, is helping them with trade compliance. And I think we're going to be releasing probably a case study on that in the next several weeks that I'm pretty excited for. And then we'll follow that with a press release and be very clear about who it is. But I'm glad you asked me that. I do want to shift really quickly and talk about the cost side of it. So, this is a story, like I said earlier, that I think everyone is grappling with. I definitely don't want to ignore this cost side of the conversation, and we do have some recommendations about how people can go about trying to control cost. 3 in particular AI-enabled moves that you can start thinking about now to tame cost volatility. So the first is predictive price sensing. That's basically combining market data and supplier quotes along with some expectation of macro signals to create landed cost bands by material and by country, right? So this is sort of an important first step in saying this is what we think it's going to cost us to bring in our components or our products, and this is an operational band that we're comfortable with. Importantly, a next step to tie into that is really, really effective should cost modeling. So if you tie should cost to design, or you make cost drivers more obvious early, those being material, feature complexity, process, you both are going to have a better understanding early of what you have to invest, and you're giving, as we pointed out in the VAVE example, you're giving members of your team a chance to weigh in on the choices that are actually getting made in design that could impact cost, and that's pretty significant. Now, the last thing, Patrick already teed it up for us, actually, is this idea of shifting towards a more dynamic sourcing model, right? So going from a fixed supplier system to being a little more flexible in who you source from. You can also make that quantitative. So some customers are working on setting up what they think of as dynamic sourcing triggers. So I spoke just a moment ago about having landed cost bands, and if a price for a product or a component is going to break through that band, then you've got a playbook or a rule set built around that condition that leads you to go and resource or to switch material, right? Or at the very least to build in some type of buffer, so you're a little more prepared to absorb the cost. Because the truth is, depending on your business model, you may be in a position where your customers are forcing you to absorb some of your cost. The important thing is to do this on purpose, right? To have this built ahead of time and not, strictly speaking, in a reactive manner. Remember, these conditions, like the tariff environment, is likely to fluctuate. It's very unlikely that this remains fixed. So you need to treat these like basically a shifting sands under your feet that you need to be prepared to react to effectively. So early planning really matters. One more question I want to pose to you, Patrick. You've worked with partners and suppliers, ours, basically every day. What do you see them thinking about in terms of their sourcing playbook, or how do our partners recommend users think about adopting CADDi to impact their sourcing? How do you see CADDi customers themselves turning to technology, say, to help them with sourcing?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you think about a sourcing playbook, the historical context is typically around things like raw materials and commodities. In the world we live in, it's more so around things like custom parts and components. So it's a little bit different than the historical context, but nonetheless, if you look at the inputs that people utilize as part of these playbooks, one, it's either your own internal historical data, so this idea of tacit or industry knowledge that's local within your company today, or it's third-party data, market trends and commodity prices and things like that. The idea is, how do we sort of build models that monitor both and leverage the data out of both our internal knowledge and experiences as well as the external market conditions? With the rise of agentic AI, to keep this short, there's a million ways for you to build these triggers and these models and these signals. Happy to share with that if anyone's interested offline on some of the things we're seeing as best practices. But the idea being, agentic models are built in 20 minutes, 30 minutes these days, which enable you to surface the relevant information to the human in the loop, ultimately the analyst, the buyer, the procurement manager, who's making the decision, and just ensuring that we get the right data in front of them at the point in time in which they need it. AI has become incredibly powerful to be able to do that. That's not just within CADDi, that's within all the AI tools that we're using. In fact, we, on Chris's team, he actually just hired a AI engineer for us internally at CADDi to build all of these workflows for our own internal processes, so that we don't have to spend a bunch of time moving data, trying to find data. All of this is being done in the background. So for the sake of time here, I know we only have a couple minutes, but that's what we're seeing. Everyone's adopting these sort of agentic agents to feed data when and where needed.
Well, it's worth us saying, right? We are seeing this with our customers, but we're not the only ones. So in prepping here, one of the pieces that I read was a report from BCG where they were saying process automation and procurement specifically has the potential for a 15 to 45% cost reduction for most organizations. So this is a thing, this is a wave that I think we're well positioned to take advantage of. I want to spend a little bit of time in Q&A, so I'm just going to say quickly with the quick wins, sort of the 90-day plan. We have a document that we're going to be sharing at the end of our time together here that highlights some of these. In fact, maybe it's worth me popping over to say, this Tribal Knowledge to AI Advantage cheat sheet is going to be shared, but probably the best utilization of it is through a short consultation with members of our team. If you are interested in doing that type of consultation, if you want some help, our team is always available to do that. You can, in fact, if you want to type parts avoided in the chat, we'll make sure to do a direct follow-up with you. But you can also request time with any member of our team on our website at us.caddi.com. So with that said, I do want to pop over into the Q&A because we have a few questions that have been posed, and hopefully the SME team will let us go just a couple of minutes over so we can ask a few of them, because I do think these are pretty interesting. The first one that popped out to me, by the way, is from Cornell. Thank you for the question. Is CADDi assisting the customer in creating Bob, or is the customer using Copilot Studio or Azure similar to build that agent? I think Chris, probably a question for you.
Yeah, they're using CADDi. Yeah, I mean we're not doing like a demo of our product right here, but we have like a chat. We have a similar type of interface that they can use to do that.
I think there's another really interesting question here. Do you target higher digital maturity customers only, or if someone's in a lower digital maturity state and they need help with that, how can we help them with digital transformation and data collection? I can take that to say, absolutely, we work with people across the full spectrum of digital maturity. And in fact, some of our best customers are folks who are a little bit earlier on that journey and are just starting to tackle digital transformation, because one of our strengths as a business actually is we have deep expertise in both manufacturing and AI. So we can help inform the early decisions in the governance piece that Chris and I were discussing early. But I think that's a really good question.
I want to say something. So yeah, we have customers who have made huge investments over the last 10 years in digital and cloud. And we have some customers that have made very little relative investments in sort of digital modernization and cloud. But I would say the majority of our customers have almost all on-prem systems. One thing I think is really exciting about today is that if you made a lot of investments over the last 10 years, AI is able to help you a lot. But if you didn't make those investments, earlier we talked about messy data. If you didn't make those investments, AI is able to kind of leapfrog you a bit further than say a few years ago, where you'd say, "Oh, I gotta modernize everything. Then I gotta get a data warehouse. Then I gotta hire a data architect, consultant, or whatever." And now you don't really need to do those things because CADDi and just in general AI is able to sort of see your data, start linking it together. You don't have to have made all these investments in structuring your data and sticking it in a data warehouse. It's able to sort of do that much faster and sort of, I guess, like cheaper than go back a few years, right?
Yeah, that's a point well made. A lot of our early wins in the U.S., I think on some level were impacted by the idea that the sort of pseudo-competitive alternative to what we were offering at the time was someone turning to Snowflake to act as a data lake and then getting Deloitte to do a consulting engagement that takes a couple of years and $3 or $4 million to complete. And we offer both the data infrastructure and AI tools to do the creation of taxonomy and an ontology for a fraction of that cost. So I know we're about 4 minutes over, and the rest of the questions in the Q&A, I think we'll make sure to answer in a follow-up thank you email to everybody. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to just, again, thank SME for hosting us and thank Chris and Patrick for doing this with me. It's always really fun to have you guys on one of these. And to everyone on the call, thank you for joining us. And I hope you do reach out. Remember, just type in the chat if you're parts avoided, if you're interested in us reaching out to have a quick conversation about how we can help you leverage AI, leverage data, and win in the current moment. So everybody have a great day.
Thank you, Aaron. I want to thank Aaron, Chris, and Patrick one more time from the CADDi team for joining us today and sharing this very insightful presentation. I also want to thank our attendees for your participation and the great questions. We hope you found the content valuable and will join us again soon. Until then, remember that SME and SME Media are here to help you stay up to date on all things manufacturing. You can find links to podcasts, webinars, including this one, publications, and news by visiting us at advancedmanufacturing.org. Thank you for tuning in.